is News Conference Extra with Conan Nolan.
Good morning and welcome to News Conference Extra, a special segment of Today in LA Weekend. Joining us from Irvine is Congresswoman Katie Porter, Democrat of the 45th Congressional District of California. That's Irvine, Tustin, Laguna Hills. She's also a member of the Financial Services Committee. So, Congresswoman, thank you for taking the time. A number of things to talk about, but first, a lot of people are watching wondering if Congress is going to get together with another bailout package. We understand that there's a big divide between Republicans and Democrats of trillions of dollars. Politico has said that Democrats may have overextended their hand, thinking Republicans would feel the heat with the extensive unemployment insurance benefits essentially ending, and that they'd come around. That hasn't happened. What is your confidence we're going to see a bill soon?
Well, this shouldn't be about Democrats and Republicans. This should be about the American people. It should be about what they need. And what they need in an economy that's been devastated by this pandemic is they need help making ends meet. And while reasonable minds can differ about exactly how we should do that, we shouldn't be engaged in this back and forth. We should get together, come up with a plan, and take action. And I think one of the things that's important for people to know is the House put forward its bill about 5-6 weeks ago, called the HEROES Act. And we hoped and wished that the Senate would then begin to immediately negotiate and respond, come up with their own ideas, and they failed to do so. So we really need to get this moving, and now is the time.
So one of the big wrinkles, of course, is what to do about public education here in California. Nationally, you have 3 children. Talk to us about the role of the federal government on this issue. Education is a local issue. It didn't become a national one until Jimmy Carter established the Department of Education. Some school districts say it's safe. They're in areas where there hasn't been quite the seriousness or the transmission rate that others. How is your office addressing that issue for your constituents who are looking for federal guidance on schooling?
Yep. The role of the federal government here is to provide high-quality, reliable research that can help guide when and how schools should reopen. It's absolutely going to come down to what states working with their counties and their local school boards decide is appropriate. This pandemic is affecting the entire country, but it's having different moments. There are places that are having hot spots with really high transmission, but probably opening school at all is not okay right now. There are other places where transmission rates are much lower, and it's important to probably open schools for the benefits that it provides to children. So this isn't something that we ought to be saying, open schools, close schools. It's something where we ought to be saying, what do schools, what do families, what do parents, teachers, staff, and local governments need to be able to make that decision and then to execute it in a way that keeps people safe. And one of the top things our schools need right now is extra funding to hire more medical personnel so that every school can have a school nurse, extra funding to have more space, that's outdoor tents to create better ventilation, sanitation. Schools need that extra funding, and that's a big part of what was in the bill that Democrats put forward, the HEROES Act.
You made sure to ask the head of the Centers for Disease Control back in March that testing should be free to anybody who needs it. Has that been codified into law at all?
Yes. So after I had that back and forth with the CDC director, I was asking him about existing law, by the way. I said, here's law that could make coronavirus testing free. Will you agree? And I had to ask him several times to get him to get to yes. We then, in Congress, on a bipartisan basis, passed the CARES Act, which makes clear that COVID testing should be free. Now, on the ground, that is still a challenge. Insurance companies have struggled and have sometimes failed to make sure that they are covering coronavirus testing. So it's really important that people know that if they should not be worried about getting a bill. It is absolutely federal law, signed into law by President Trump, that COVID testing should be free, covered without copays and deductibles and things like that. So I hope no American will hesitate to go get a COVID test if they believe they've been exposed or are having symptoms, and know that we are still continuing to hold insurance companies and this administration's feet to the fire to make sure they're making good on both the promise that I got in the hearing, but also what was enacted into federal law, making crystal clear that that's a promise that should be delivered on.
What is your priority legislation on this issue?
With regard to COVID, we're working hard on thinking about how to help families. One of the things that we're concerned about is what parents are going to do as the child care crisis continues. COVID has shut down a lot of child care providers. Many families are facing increased expenses. They've had to, because they can't get into a child care provider or they're closed, they have their numbers, trying to make sure that we're supporting families who are keeping their kids safe. So I have a bill called the Support Working Families Act. What it would do is make clear that people who cannot afford to pay for childcare because of this pandemic are able to get unemployment assistance if they need to stay home to care for their kids during this time.
Listen, I know you need to go, but I have to ask you this. This past week, you've been profiled in Elle magazine, People magazine, Time magazine. There's an argument to be made that some other freshman members of Congress have made a big splash, but nobody has advanced a cause more than you have. Both Republicans and Democrats admire the amount of copious research you do for your committee meetings. I'm just wondering, if there is a president, a Democratic president in the fall, would you accept an appointment in a Biden administration? Have you ever thought that they may ask you to become Secretary of Treasury? Would you do that?
I'm always thinking about what I can do to help the American people. So I'm constantly asking myself, could I make a difference here? Could I make a difference there? That's why I ran for office in the first place. But I will tell you that COVID and the crisis that our communities are facing in Orange County keeps me more than busy every day. But I'm absolutely thinking about what should the next president of this country be doing? What changes do we need to make to address problems that families are having trouble making ends meet, that the costs of housing are so high here in Southern California, that young people and even their parents and grandparents are struggling with student loan debts. These are all issues that I'm thinking about, and I'm going to step up and be willing to serve whenever I can, however I can.
The Honorable Katie Porter, Democrat from Orange County, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
And NBC4's news conference at 9 o'clock, we'll be talking with two members of the LA County Board of Supervisors, Catherine Barger and Sheila Kuehl. Plus, we'll be handicapping the race for vice president as it comes down to possibly two Californians who may run with Joe Biden in the fall. That's news conference at 9 o'clock following Meet the Press. We'll see you then.